today's video is going to be my November reading wrap-up. I had a really good month in November, so let's get straight into the statistics. In November, I read a grand total of 21 books. That is the most I've read all year in 1 month. I hit 21 books 3 times in 2019, but I have not hit 21 books in 2020, so I am really pleased that I managed to really pull it back at the end of this year so that I'm not in a rush to finish my Goodreads goal. I mean, I still am, but I'm not in as much of a rush as I was at the beginning of November. So 21 books. I had no 1 stars. I had 3 2 stars. I had 8 3 stars. I had 6 4 stars, and I had 4 5 stars. The formats of the books that I read no ebooks this month. I read 5 audiobooks, and I read 16 physical books. The bindings of those physical books, 5 were hardback and 11 were paperback. Sorry, I'm not liking my eye makeup today and it's making my eye water. So the genres that I read no thrillers, no contemporaries. I read 1 classic, 2 mangas, graphic novels. I read a total of 14 middle grades. I read no non-fiction, and I read 4 sci-fi fantasy books. Those middle grades are because of the readathon that I was taking part in, which was Believeathon 3. I will go through that in a moment. The authors that I read from this month, 9 were male, 11 were female, and 1 was genderqueer, which means they go by the pronouns they or them. The origin of the books, where I got them from, 7 were borrowed and 14 were from my physical TBR. The audio hours that I listened was a total of 21 hours and 10 minutes, and the physical pages that I read was 4,303 pages. So that is all the statistics. So let's go into the readathons that I did. So, as you know, I was taking part in the Believeathon 3. So let's go through those books first. So, originally my plan was to read about 5 or 6 books that I could double up for different prompts. But because I realised I was so far behind on my Goodreads goal, I decided to really push for it and go for it and read 1 book per prompt, and that is what I managed to do. So the first book that I read was to receive the key, and that was to read a mystery, and I was kind of inspired to read this by one of my subscribers who mentioned that she absolutely loved this story, and that is Malamander by Thomas Taylor. I really thoroughly enjoyed this. I gave this a 4 stars. I really liked the spookiness, the atmosphere in this. We have a young boy who is the lost and founder for the Nautilus Hotel. I think, yeah, the Grand Nautilus Hotel. Sorry, pardon me. Grand Nautilus Hotel. And one night, a young girl climbs through his window and says, "Hey, I'm lost. Can you find my parents?" And the story is that many years ago, she was found in the hotel and her parents had gone missing. Only their shoes could be found down by the beach. And then she was sent off to live with other family, I think it was. But she now wants to come back and try and find out what happened to her parents. But there is more to this story than meets the eye, and I loved this story. I must admit, I wasn't drawn to this. You know, the blurb on it was kind of like, I don't know, it didn't draw me in, but once I read it, I was like, okay, I'm picking up Gargantus, which is the second book, because I need to know what happens next. So I am going to be looking out for Gargantus, which is book 2, because I really enjoyed this. I really did, and I highly recommend it. The next book I read was to get the fingerprints, which was to read an author from a different culture. For that one, I read The Jumbies by Tracy Baptiste. I did say that I might try and get to the book 2 during the month of November, because that one is Rise from the Jumbies, and that one has black mermaids in it, and I'm really interested in getting to that, but I didn't quite get to it, so that will have to wait for another day. I really love the friendships in here. I loved the relationships in here. It is a beautiful story, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. This was one of the earlier books that I read. I gave this one a 4 stars, just checking my notes. I gave this one a 4 stars as well. Cannot wait to get on to the second book. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, very spooky. Would have been great to read over Halloween. Just a beautiful story and lots of adventures as well. The next book I read was actually my first audiobook, and that was to collect The Scream, and the prompt was to read an audiobook. So I read The Eye of the North by Sinead O'Hart. I gave this 3 stars. Let me just turn to my notes. We have a young girl called Emmeline who's never left her home, and she likes it that way, but her scientist parents suddenly disappear, and she is shipped off to France to go and live with a relative. However, along the way on the ship, she meets this strange little boy who's a stowaway called Thing, and he causes a bit of trouble, and when she tries to go back to her room, she realises her room is being ransacked by some bad guys, and so they have to try and escape, and these bad guys are trying to capture her and take her as a kind of a ransom thing going on. And it was, I think I was listening to this as I was doing something else, and it didn't quite make me stop and want to listen to the story. It was just kind of like on in the background. It didn't really capture my imagination, and to be honest, I've forgotten how it ends. I don't believe it's the first of a series or anything, so I assume it wrapped up quite well. But it didn't capture my imagination. It just didn't grasp me the way that I wanted it to. So yeah, that one only got a 3 stars for me. The next prompt was to get the torn page, and that was to read a supernatural book. And again, I had an audiobook for this one, and that was Amelia Fang and the Barbaric Ball by Laura Ellen Anderson. And for this one, I also gave it a 3 stars. This is a story about a vampire girl who is hanging out with her friends. She has her pet pumpkin called Squashy, but then she is forced to befriend the king's son called Tanzyn, and he's a bit of a spoilt brat, and he keeps asking for things that he doesn't really want, but he asks for them because he can. And he asks for her pet Squashy, and he takes Squashy back to the castle with him, and Amelia is devastated. Obviously, it's her best friend. And so she, along with her friends, hatches this plan to rescue her pet, pumpkin Squashy. Very cute little story, great for little kids. Obviously, in the physical book, there's going to be lots of illustrations. I've seen a couple of the illustrations when I've seen the covers and things like that in bookshops and stuff. And I think the artwork is absolutely amazing. I think I would have probably enjoyed this more if I'd have been reading it physically, but as it was an audiobook, I lost that enjoyment of seeing the illustrations. But I think this book, I probably won't read the others unless I can get them on audiobook. I probably won't, rush out and buy these, because they generally are for little children. So when I next start Melissa's box for 2021, I might purchase a box set of these to put into Melissa's box, which is a charity box that I've started doing every year, to give to charity, to a children's charity. So I might pick up these books for that box, but I'm not going to be too rude and read them first, because I don't want to spoil them before I give them away to charity, obviously. But yeah, I would definitely recommend these for younger children. Okay, the next book that I read was for the Crown prompt, and that was to read a book set in an alternate world. And this book is The Monsters of Rookhaven by Padraig Kenny. I don't know how to say that name, but I love this book. I really, really enjoyed this book. So we have the story of this young girl who lives in this house with monsters, and she is her home and her gardens and her world is set behind a veil that separates her from the human world. But one night, two young children discover a tear in this veil, and they go through it and they discover this house, and they end up staying at this house for a while, and begin to like become friends with the monsters in the house. They aren't aware that they are monsters at first, but the young girl of the two siblings has an inkling that something is not quite right with this family. And then we have this bad guy arrive in the nearby village, and he starts stirring up trouble. I loved this. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was such a great pleasure to read. It was so good reading the story as well from like the monster's point of view, rather than from, it was from multiple point of views, but we got majoritively from the monster point of view. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, gave it 4 stars. The next prompt was Spilled Ink, and this was to read a book featuring ghosts. Again, I turned to an audiobook, and I read Ghost Squad by Clarabelle A. Ortega, and I gave this 3 stars. Let me turn to my notes again. So this was a kind of like a Coco meets a Stranger Things inspired kind of story. So we have Loosely Luna, who can see ghosts, and her and her friend Sid accidentally awaken malicious spirits and join forces with Sid's witch grandmother and their cat Chunk to fight the malicious spirits and reverse the curse. This had like Mexican kind of culture in there. And I will say this is probably a book that I should have read physically, because it dealt with a culture that I know very little about. There was a lot of references that I just didn't get, that I just didn't latch onto, that I couldn't understand. But I just felt like I couldn't quite capture the true ghosts, the true spirit of this book, because it was dealing with a culture I had very little knowledge about. So I think this is one that I don't know. It seemed interesting, and it seemed really like a story that I could enjoy. I only gave it 3 stars, but it is something that I would like to give another chance to. But I probably wouldn't purchase it, but I may see if my local library has a copy, or if I can download the ebook or something. The next prompt was for the Dagger, and this was to read a book set in a dangerous setting. And we have our first 5 stars, people. I read Frostheart 2, Escape from Aurora. Okay, so I wasn't that taken by Frostheart 1. I thought it was an okay book, but I felt like it was building up to a good story. I felt like it was good, but it wasn't great, it wasn't fantastic. I felt this one really sort of captured more danger, more action, more thrilling and excitement. There was clues and puzzles in this one, and I absolutely adored that. And there was a moment in this book where my heart was literally in my mouth, and I just loved it. It was such a thrilling ride all the way through, and I cannot wait for book 3 now. I only bought book 2 because of the artwork, because the artwork is stunning. Jamie Littler, who's the author, is also the illustrator, and I literally bought this book because it is so beautiful. But I'm glad I did, because I loved the story. 5 stars. So the next prompt was for the backpack, and that is to read a new to me author. For that, I read The Deepest Breath by Meg Greene. This is a middle grade told in verse, completely in verse. And when I found this and discovered this in Waterstones, I was so excited for this book, and I kept it for Believeathon 3. And I was really enjoying it. I was really enjoying it, and I was all willing to give it 5 stars. But there was a moment in this book where I feel that instead of the character's voice, we were getting the author's voice. There is a moment in here, and I did speak to one of my subscribers who is a teacher, and I just wanted to sort of get the feel as like, am I wrong in this? Am I not feeling this right? I just wanted to seek another opinion, because obviously I don't know what kids today are like, because my kid's up and grown. She's an adult now, officially. She's 21. So I don't know what young children are like nowadays. So I wanted to see if this was the voice that I was hearing was a childlike voice, or if it was the adult's voice, the author's voice that I was hearing. And on discussing it with my fellow subscriber, we both believe that this went a little bit, just a little bit, on a rant. And it threw me completely out of the story, completely out of the atmosphere. And I had to drop it a point. So it would have been a 5 stars, but I've given it a 4. So it's not a bad rant, and it's not a bad book. But I just feel like I'm all for morals, but the author has got to remember that it is the story that counts, not their personal emotions and feelings. But do pick it up, it is a really interesting book. Talking of disappointments. Okay, don't hate me. The next prompt was for the Footprints, and that is to read a book featuring a prominent villain. And this was the last book that I read. And I don't think it fulfills the prompt. I read The Castle of Tangled Magic by Sophie Anderson. Now, I watched her interview with Gavin from How to Tame Your Gavin channel, who hosted the Believeathon 3. I watched his interview with Sophie Anderson, and she seems a lovely lady, so happy and cheerful and bubbly and crazy, and she seems like such a lovely lady. And I've been wanting to pick her books up for a while. I have downloaded her House with Chicken Legs book from my library app many times and just never got around to it before it's been returned. But I decided as a treat for my birthday I was going to pick up this book. And I was so excited for it, I left it till last. It took a really long time to get started. It took 100 pages for our main character, Olia, to even get to the door to go through to the other world. I was like, hello, come on, get going. Probably a bit like people watching my videos. I felt she waffled. And as a fellow waffler, I can understand that. But in a book for a middle grade, I just don't think you've got time to waffle. I think you need to get into the action. I think that was my problem with Frost Heart 1. I felt like there was a lot of time getting to things, but in Frost Heart 2, we were straight into the action. We were going on. But this one, it was so slow. And it took a long time to get to the other world. And then once we were in the other world, I loved the characters, I loved the world, I loved that concept. It was such an amazing concept. I loved that. I loved the characters in this book. Poor Felix, my little heart, oh my goodness. And then you've got Cascadia, who just sounds so beautiful and magical. And then, is it Dub Dub? It's just Dub. It's just one Dub, not two. Dub's character, I absolutely loved him. You even have a little cameo appearance of the House with Chicken Legs in here. I really did enjoy that part of the story. But the thing that absolutely killed this for me, the bit that actually made me, go, yep, nope. And I was so close to DNFing it. That's how bad I felt about it, was the villain. I'm not going to say any spoilers, but I felt the villain was a little bit wishy-washy. Again, I am all for morals of the story, but when the moral of the story overcomes the story itself, like, no, the moral should be in the background. It should be whispering along the lines, but this one was like shouting at me about the moral of the story, and there was a choice made with the villain, and I did not like that choice. It is obviously a personal opinion of mine. You may have loved this book, and I hope you did. If you've read this, I hope you enjoyed it. There was a lot of potential for this. As I say, I loved the characters. I loved the world building. I even enjoyed the writing. It was just some of the choices that was made that I just felt dragged it down. And I gave it a 2 stars. So the next prompt was for the hand mirror, and that was to read a book with a beautiful cover. I could have chosen any of my middle grades at all, but instead I chose, because time, I chose a quick one. It's a very, very short one. This has a beautiful cover like this. I would love to go and play in that garden, let's be honest. And this is a Puffin Classics, A Child's Garden of Verses by Robert Louis Stevenson. And this was also 2 stars. Robert Louis Stevenson is well known for his book Treasure Island, which I absolutely love and adore. I love that story. But this one, okay, it's dated. It is dated because obviously he wrote this, oh God knows, when did he write this? Well, he lived between 1850 and 1894. So obviously this was written a long time ago in a world that was entirely different to ours. So this mention of, you know, servants and things like that. But also, like, there's a couple of questionable, very questionable content in here. Like, there's one poem that was very much like, if you're not British, then really, like, who are you, kind of poem, which I felt was a little on the nose. It was almost saying, like, everybody wants to be British, everybody should want to be British, because Britain is so much better. But yeah, so it was a little bit on the nose, but also as well was, after a few of these poems, they all got a little bit samey same. There is one poem in here that I remember from my childhood. faster than fairies, faster than witches, bridges and houses, hedges and ditches, and charging along like troops in a battle, all through the meadows, the horses and cattle, all of the sights of the hill and the plain, flies thick as driving rain, and ever again in the wink of an eye, painted stations whistle by. Here is a child who clambers and scrambles all by himself in gathering brambles. Here is a tramp who stands and gazes, and there is the green for stringing the daisies. Here is a cart run away in the road, lumping along with man and load, and here is a mill, and there is a river, each a glimpse and gone forever. I remember loving that poem when I was a kid, and to discover it again in this little book is probably the only reason why I'm going to keep this book. So the next prompt is for the chain, and this was to read a book with a colourful cast of characters, and for that one I went for Through the Water Curtain and Other Tales from Around the World. This is a beautiful cover. It is a hardback, and these are selected and introduced by Cornelia Funk, who wrote the Inkheart series, I want to say. Yeah, who wrote the Inkheart series. So this is a bunch of short stories from around the world, as it says, that are not quite so conventional, shall we say. So we have different creatures and characters like the boy who drew cats, and Katura, Lord of the Winds, and we have Bluebeard. That's the only one that I'd really heard of, and the Tale of the Six Swans. I'd heard of that one. But we have the Frog Princess in here, and the girl who gave a knight a kiss out of necessity. And what I really enjoyed about this was at the end of every short story, Cornelia Funk wrote a little bit about why she picked that story, why she likes that story, and what she thinks we can take from it. So I did really enjoy this. I gave it 3 stars, mainly because there were some stories that I wasn't that taken with and some stories that I really liked. So I gave it an average of 3 stars because it's smack bang in the middle, so kind of compensate for those I didn't like and those I did like. So yeah, really enjoyed it. The next prompt was The Flash of Lightning, which is to read a book including folk tales, and for that one I went for another short one. It is A Necklace of Raindrops by Joan Aiken and Jan Pienkowski. I believe Jan Pienkowski was the illustrator, and the illustrations in this was just beautiful. I loved this book. These 2 books are very similar in that they both deal with fairy tales and folk tales. But this one I loved every story in this book. I just absolutely loved my time reading this book. It was magical and whimsical, and I felt like a little child being read these wonderful magical stories all over again. I really did feel like I was taken back to my childhood with these. It was just a wonderful time reading them, and I will probably be picking this book up time and time again in the future to read and reread over and over again. And that for me is a definite 5 stars. If I finish reading it and I think, you know what, I can't wait to read this all over again, that for me is a definite 5 stars. So 5 stars it got. Wonderful and magical. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. The story of A Necklace of Raindrops was so beautiful, and teaches you not to steal. So yeah, really love that. And the final prompt was to collect The Shadow, and this is to read a book published in 2020, and for that I chose A Secret of Birds and Bone by Kieran Millward Hargrave. I have read a couple of her books now. I think there's only one of hers that I might not have read so far, but I have read all of her other books. I gave this a 3 stars. This story, it was weird. So we have a mother and her 2 children, and the mother uses bones, skeleton bones, to create boxes and furniture, and the young girl sleeps in a bed made out of bones. It's never explained why she uses bones, So I felt like it lacked there a little bit. Yeah, it was a good story and I did enjoy it. I gave it 3 stars. But I just felt like it was lacking something. I read this one right after I'd read The Monsters of Rookhaven, and as I'd given that one a 4, and this one didn't quite meet the same standards of The Monsters of Rookhaven, I couldn't quite give this a 4. So that was the last book for the Believeathon 3 that I read. But that wasn't the only readathon that I ended up taking part in November. I discovered another readathon called the Doors Readathon, and it was hosted by a girl from the channel Drinking by My Shelf, as well as a couple of other channels. I will see if I can link their channels for you in the description box down below. Along with obviously Gavin's channel as well, because he was the host of Believeathon 3. And this was a really kind of like choose your own adventure readathon, which I used to love those books, and I am on the hunt for some more of those. So the first prompt that I got was 5, and I could interpret it however I liked. So I chose a 5-star prediction, and I read Nevernight. Now, I did start this in October, but I didn't finish it. So I figured this was the perfect opportunity to finish it. And I ended up having to switch to the audiobook to finish this off, because I, strangely enough, wasn't driven to finish it. I enjoyed the story. It didn't get 5 stars with me. I was very wrong in my broadcast for this, in my forecast for this. It only got 4 stars. It was good and I did enjoy it. I got on okay with the many footnotes. If you feel like footnotes are going to throw you out of the story, maybe avoid this one, because the footnotes are part of the story, really. One thing I did like about this was kind of like the very chatty formula of writing that J. Kristoff had. It was almost like he was telling you this story verbally. And I liked that. I liked it about this. There's a lot of swear words in this, the use of the C word. So if you're squeamish about that, maybe stay away. But yeah, there's no excuses for this. It packs a punch, like it doesn't hold back. But it wasn't quite a 5 stars for me. Yes, I would like to continue with this trilogy, because I believe all 3 books are out now. But I'm not in any rush. I don't feel driven to carry on. I will see if I can pick it up second-hand, this 2nd and 3rd book, but I'm not going out and rushing to buy them brand new. Prompt 2 was a meme that said, "I'm back." And so for that one, I picked a reread, because I'm back reading this book. And that is The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is the 2nd book in the Falcon the Air series by Holly Black, and the 2nd book to The Cruel Prince. And I was buddy reading this with Charlotte, but seems Charlotte has lost her copy. I think she's found it again. I don't know if she's finished it yet, but it definitely wasn't in her November wrap-up, so I know she hadn't finished it by the time she'd filmed that video. I can't wait for her to finish this book. It ends on such like a cliffhanger. It ends so well. Yeah, this is definitely a 5 stars for me. I love this series. That's why I was happy to reread it with Charlotte, who's reading them for the first time. And I can't wait for her to get to the end of this book so we can move on to the Queen of Nothing. But turns out we're not going to finish this series, this trilogy, by the end of the year, so we're going to have to read The Queen of Nothing in January then. But I don't mind. I will wait. I will wait for Charlotte, but I love this story. Prompt 3 was to read a book that feels like Marvel. Now, I have only watched a couple of the Marvel films, but I know that they started off as comics. So I went along the line and read a comic. So this one is from Classical Comics. It is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And I discovered these classical comics in my local library when I found the classical comic for Dracula. And because I had just fallen in love with the story Dracula, I loaned it out and I devoured that book. And so I have been buying other stories from this classical comics publisher ever since. I've got Wuthering Heights and I've got Jane Eyre now, thanks to Charlotte. She bought me that one as a gift because Jane Eyre is her favourite classic. So I've got a few of these. I've only got the Jane Eyre one left to read, but the artwork in here is just stunning. It's so beautiful. And these classical comics come in two formats. You have the one which I buy, which is in the original text, which means that it follows very closely to the sense of text from the original classic. So where it would say, "Wherefore art thou?" This one, the original text, would say, "Wherefore art thou?" But it also comes in quick text, which is where it brings it into a more modern style text. So "Wherefore art thou" would become "Where are you?" So if the thing that has frightened you about classics in the past has been its language and the density of the writing, maybe pick up or have a look at these classical comics in the quick text format, because they will be in a more modern day speech, and you've got this beautiful comic style way of telling the story and you can follow along with the pictures and stuff. I would like to try and get my husband to have a look at these, but as I say, mine are in the original text, so I might have to see if I can buy a couple in the quick text version just to see what they're like, and maybe hopefully my husband will give them a go. So yeah, I just love this story. Frankenstein is one of those stories that I want to fall in love with, and when I read the original story in its normal written format, I was thrown a bit because the story that I was expecting was not what I got. But it is one that I would love to reread in the future, and after reading the classical comic version, I'm more inclined to want to pick up Frankenstein again in the future. So yeah, definitely going to be in for a reread of the original Frankenstein story in the future. But if I want to just dabble my foot into the story, I can always pick up the classical comic. And I gave this 5 stars as well, because I love them. I absolutely love them. I think I've given all of my classical comics that I've read so far, Dracula, Wuthering Heights, and now Frankenstein, I think I've given them all 5 stars because I just love these. And they also provide like a teacher's resource pack. So here at the back, teachers can purchase these where they have over 100 photocopyable pages, cross-curricular topics and activities, and they're ideal for differentiated teaching. I'm sure teachers will understand what that means. And there's a CD which includes an electronic version of the teaching book for whiteboards, laptops and digital printing, and it only costs $19.99 for all of that. The fourth prompt for the 1000 Doors Readathon was another meme, and that was "I'm an acquired taste." So for that, I decided to pick a book that had different reviews on it. Some loved it, some hated it, some thought it cheesy, and for that one I actually picked up a library book, and that is Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead. I don't like the front cover of this book. I like the original covers like this, and I am planning on picking up the box set because I loved it. Loved this story, absolutely loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't quite 5 stars, but I really did enjoy this story. I have watched the film. I really wish they'd made another one because I want to know what that bit at the end of the film is about. Like, so I have already got the second book on order. It's waiting at my library. I have to go and pick it up this afternoon. So yeah, I've already got the second book on order, so I will be reading that very soon, hopefully, because I just absolutely love this story. I gave this a 4 stars as well. Really, really enjoyed it. And the last prompt for the Thousand Doors readathon was language. So again, I could interpret this how I liked. So I decided to interpret it as a book that had been translated from another language. So for that one, I read my other library book. Luckily, it fit the prompt. So this is The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. It's part of the Witcher series. This is again the Netflix tie-in cover. I don't like these. I prefer the original covers. I have looked for the box set for these, but I can't find it on my booksellers that I like to choose from. I'm trying to steer away from Amazon since a very recent bit of trouble with them that I've had. So I try to steer away from Amazon now and just use other booksellers. But I'm trying to find the box set of these because I really enjoyed these. So of course we have Geralt of Rivia, and he is journeying through hunting monsters. These are like little short stories. On here we see Yennefer, and then this young girl who I can never remember the name of. Yennefer and this young girl are not in this book. We do have one story, we have one story with Yennefer in, but nothing with this young girl in. So I don't understand why they've put them on the cover of this one, because the majority of these stories just have Geralt of Rivia. Think season 1 of The Witcher on Netflix with just the Geralt of Rivia stories. And that's what you're getting in this book. Yennefer's stories are not in here. There's only one, which is the one with the djinn in it. And yeah, so they were enjoyable. I did enjoy it. But it was a bit of a slog to get through it. I would like to carry on the series though, so I gave this a 3 stars. I just feel like it has potential. It has a lot of potential to get really good, but I think because I'd already watched the series before I'd read the book, it was like, yeah, I know all this. Tell me something I don't know. So I think that it kind of had an issue with that because of that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, so gave it 3 stars. So one of the last physical books that I read as well, which was not part of any readathon, was just simply to try and get another book in, and that was Saga Volume 4. So this follows a kind of Romeo and Juliet kind of storyline, two people from different warring worlds coming together and forming a relationship and having a young child. And this is the story of their like trying to escape and live a normal life. This is a very graphic novel, like really graphic. Like I open this up and the first page is literally someone giving birth from the doctor's point of view. Yeah. Did not appreciate that. I mean, I'm no prude, but seriously, we've had some pretty graphic scenes in these graphic novels, and this one was the first graphic novel most people said to me I should read. Like, you have to read Saga. Like, you must read Saga. It's an excellent story. And I'm like, it's an okay story with lots of graphic nudity, sex, gruesome scenes. I just not my thing. I gave it a 3 stars. I do like the story. The story is okay, but those graphic scenes, I'm not I'm not appreciating them. I do have the 5th volume, and I believe it goes up to number 9. But I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't know whether I'm going to purchase 6, 7, 8 and 9 to finish the series. I might just, and then I might donate them to the local library, because I think they would really appreciate these. But that would be the only reason I would go on to purchase the last 4 copies of this series. And the other books that I read this month were audiobooks. So I read George by Alex Gino, who is a genderqueer author. So this is a book about a child who other people know them as a boy, but she believes that she is a girl. So it obviously deals with transgender. And she would like to audition for the part of Charlotte in the school play of Charlotte's Web, but she feels shy about putting herself forward for a female role. And when she wants to tell her mum about this, she struggles to admit the truth out loud. This was a very heartfelt and empowering book. It was beautifully written and beautifully told in the audiobook. I really enjoyed this one. I really liked the good friendship that she has with her friend, and the acceptance that this friend eventually shows to her as well. I thought that was beautifully done, like the way that her friend kind of just rolls with what she wants. I think it's amazing. So I really enjoyed this book, and I gave George, let me have a look, I gave George a 3 stars. And then I read Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl. I gave Fantastic Mr. Fox a 2 stars as well. This is a story about Mr. Fox, who outwits 3 farmers, Boggis, Bunce and Bean. This is obviously a childhood story that I remember from a long time ago. It is a little gruesome in parts, and there's some possible fat-phobic parts in there, with the way that one of the farmers is described. But being an obese person myself, I didn't really feel like it was a personal attack. It was just, that's the way this person was described. But I just feel like a lot of Roald Dahl's writing has dated. And it's just, when we look at what we have today for children to read, Roald Dahl, he was a good author in his time, but reading his books now, I would not choose his books over some of the newer authors that are coming up today. The BFG is always going to be one of my favourites of his. I just think that he's had his time, and there are much better children's authors out there now for our children to read and to learn from. So yeah, that is all of the books. Phew, that went on forever. So yeah, that is all of the books that I read in November. It was a very good month for me. I hope that I can keep up the momentum for December and get my Goodreads goal done and achieved, because I am fighting for it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!